The best way to get a superhero to fear you is to show them something they haven't seen before. Welcome back, Nerd Squad, it's me, Amanda.
And I'm your host, Adam, and today we'll be counting down another top 10 unbelievable villain upgrades on this part 3. Which villains do you think deserve a power boost? Let us know down below.
Number 10, Harley Quinn. In retrospect, what might seem like a natural evolution for this character, at the time, I'm sure, seemed quite revolutionary considering her origin. Harley Quinn is a comic book character who originally hailed from the animated world of DC, being so successful and so well loved as a result of her animated appearances in Batman the Animated Series that she was incorporated as well into comic book lore. She was initially only intended to be a small character for the animated world as well, but simply became just too popular for her to not become more prominent in the show and then move over to the comics. Harley initially was introduced to us as the wacky clown girlfriend of the Joker, or perhaps more like his wannabe girlfriend, as the Joker seemed to often mistreat and sidestep Harley and her attempts at romance at almost every turn, often more focused on capturing or defeating Batman than he ever was on Harl's. His behavior towards her almost seemed to result in a kind of Stockholm-like syndrome manifesting in Harley that Harley struggled to break thereafter. Fortunately, she did eventually break it, and with some help and support from her good friend and later girlfriend, Poison Ivy, I think we can all consider this was a major upgrade for her character, and her own prowess as a villain. And honestly, it makes sense, because I feel like Harley's so great she deserves to be independent, you know? Especially in the Harley Quinn animated series, it's quickly implied in season 1 that Harley was perhaps more of the secret mastermind behind the Joker than her puddin' would ever give her credit for.
Number 9, Dr. Doom, Avengers BC. In volume 5 of Thor from 2018, we get a little peek at the alternate reality of Earth 14412, where millions of years in the future, humankind has been completely wiped from the Earth, or almost completely. As some people know, even at the end of everything, there will still always be Doom. Dr. Doom inexplicably survived the wiping out of humanity, and since Doom is constantly trying to find ways to become more and more powerful, he decided to try and obtain the powers of the prehistoric Avengers. When All-Father Thor showed up back on Earth and restored life, Doom came back to conquer, powered by the infinitely powerful Starbrand and a spirit of vengeance. He had the powers of the Iron Fist, and he wielded the Eye of Agamotto and the Cloak of Levitation. Plus, he had been developing his own abilities for a millennia. Returning to Earth and being enraged by what has happened to Latveria, plus wanting to claim the Phoenix Force, Mjolnir, and the Thor Force with these abilities, he fought against All-Father Thor, who was powered up by the Phoenix Force inside of the Earth for 99 years, causing massive earthquakes and eruptions, and unfortunately losing, as all villains must.
Number 8, Weather Wizard. Weather Wizard is a member of the Rogues, a villain team who mainly go up against the Flash. When Captain Cold was tired of being defeated time and time again by his nemesis, he decided to take matters into his own hands by combining his and his teammates' weapons with their DNA, thereby giving them powers all their own, as opposed to them, needing to rely on tech and equipment. For Weather Wizard, after the incident, he no longer needed his weather wand, and instead simply had control over weather just inherently. He typically preferred to utilize these powers through firing down bolts of lightning at his enemies, which honestly, if I had the power over weather, I'd probably also go with lightning because it's pretty OP. Or maybe, I guess, I don't know, rain that you can't escape. I hate that when it's just drizzling and it's like all around you, even if you have an umbrella up. Ugh. Ugh.
Number 7, Loki, Sorcerer Supreme. As we learn in Doctor Strange number 385, every few decades the Vishanti will gather the greatest sorcerers from around the globe and set them against each other in what is basically a tournament to decide on who will become the Sorcerer Supreme of that realm. There have been 2 previous tournaments, both of which saw Stephen Strange as the winner, but the most recent competition saw something different happen. Loki, Laufey's son, seeking to make up for all the bad things he had done in the past, seemed to actually come out on top, becoming the new Sorcerer Supreme, even though he wasn't even a candidate in the first place. The Vishanti decided that they wanted someone who wasn't immortal to take over as Sorcerer Supreme, which is a bit of a weird reason, but hey, I ain't complaining. Stephen, being an extremely sore loser and wanting to stop Loki from finding an extremely powerful spell, recruits the Sentry, steals magic from Yggdrasil, the World Tree, and allowed himself to be possessed by the Void to take his title back. Turns out that the whole tournament environment was actually an illusion created by Loki, apparently to bring Steven down so he would in turn become strong enough to handle some big events that were coming their way, aka War of the Realms, Damnation, Infinity Countdown, and Final Host.
Number 6. TRION Juggernaut. What's more powerful than the Juggernaut on a regular day? How about a version of Juggy who can literally muscle his way into other dimensions? That is what we're talking about when it comes to this version of the Juggernaut, the TRION Juggernaut. This all went down after Juggernaut was imbued with cosmic powers via the TRION, an interdimensional entity that first appeared in X-Men issue number 88. This all happened as a result of the fact that Kane Marco basically lost his abilities after being tricked, and so the X-Men ultimately decided to save him, because you know, they are the X-Men, they are heroes. When his powers were restored, however, it was revealed that the crystal that they had been stored in after being taken from him was apparently not empty, and with it came the power and influence of the diabolical entity known as TRION, who possessed Kane, elevating his powers. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us that you love us by clicking that like button. Click it, do it, click it.
Click it! Number 5. Gold Goblin. One of the most surprising things to happen to a villain is when they become a hero. Usually this happens with the most likable of villains, Magneto, Doctor Doom, Loki, but one villain who I have never found to be particularly nice was the Green Goblin. Now, sure, Norman Osborn is a pretty conflicted guy who suffers from some severe mental health issues, but given the way he has repeatedly attempted to make Peter Parker's life a living hell, and usually with the most extreme methods, I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him, which, with these tiny arms, isn't very far. Well, later last year, Norman had a bit of a change of heart thanks to the villain Sin Eater. All of Norman's sins had been removed, whatever that means, and now Norman is filled with regret. After supplying Peter with a job and a new suit and even a glider of his own, Norman jumps in to help Peter against Ned Leeds and Roderick Kingsley, the Hobgoblins, donning a prototype suit and glider and being dubbed the Gold Goblin by those who witnessed him. It's not that Norman gained a massive power boost, but more of a morality boost and a cool new advanced look, which he is currently using to do good after years and years of being the absolute worst.
Number 4. God Killer Grail. In my previous video, part 2 of this series, I talked about someone else wielding the God Killer, but before that villain had it, Grail did. Which really, this upgrade fits extremely well with her and makes her seemingly even more unstoppable, considering that her whole thing is, you know, kind of basically just killing gods. Initially, Grail's ambition was to defeat her father Darkseid. This was the task given to her by her mother, who was an Amazonian assassin who bore Darkseid's child, seeing the child as a means to an end for defeating the dread new god and ruler of Apocalypse. Grail by herself is already a powerhouse, possessing basically magical abilities as well as new god abilities, so when you add in the God Killer, it really just feels like overkill. Over God kill.
Number 3. King Thanos. Thanos in the MCU is fueled by a desire to save the universe. He erases half of the life in the universe to cut down overconsumption of resources. Well, in the comics, that is not the case at all. In the comics, Thanos is a psychopath, an extremely powerful galactic warlord, all in the name of trying to please a girl. Not just any girl, but Death herself, the skeletal cosmic entity that embodies decay and destruction. And he pines after her hard. So much so that in the alternate timeline of TRN 666, his quest to please her led him to the end of life of almost every single living thing in the galaxy, and he became the king of nothing that remained. He had a servant in the form of Frank Castle, who was a spirit of vengeance and possessed the power cosmic. He kept the Incredible Hulk in his dungeon as his attack dog, and he subjected himself to the penance stare every morning as a nice little reminder of how utterly despicable he is. In order to finally achieve his goal of being with Mistress Death, King Thanos realized he himself needed to pass on, and to defeat the one being who had always eluded him, the Fallen One, which is an incredibly amped up Silver Surfer. To help him do both of these tasks, King Thanos used the Time Stone to bring his younger self to the future, but it didn't exactly go as planned.
Number 2. Queen Ivy. While deceptively named after basically a houseplant, Queen Ivy is one of the most powerful versions we've ever seen of this character. This is a version of Ivy that manifested when it was revealed that she had split into two separate beings, Ivy and Queen Ivy. Ivy was more fixated on the fact that she was going through, you know, some major identity crises, while Queen Ivy was kind of more interested in living that true villain life. After the two halves joined back together again, we were left with just Poison Ivy once more, back to her somewhat normal self. But this version of Pamela has definitely been changed by the experience of splitting apart and rejoining, as she now has some fungi-related spore powers. These can be used to infect those who stand against her, and have been shown to result in horrifying hallucinogenic experiences that lead to severe deformation, ultimately resulting in an extremely painful looking death. Would not wish it on anyone.
And at number 1 is the God of Apocalypse. Lex Luthor is one of the greatest villains of all time. For a seemingly normal man with a brilliant mind, he consistently brings the most powerful beings around to their knees. But during DC's New 52, he went to a whole different level. During the Darkseid War storyline, Darkseid falls at the hands of the Anti-Monitor. When this happens, Lex was trapped on Apokolips, where he encountered the Forgotten People, a group who held a prophecy that essentially said that the next ruler of Apokolips would be a human. Now, while they assumed it would be Superman, all Lex Luthor had to do to make it otherwise was tell a little old lie. Lex said that he was the man from their prophecy, which led the Forgotten People to contain the Omega Effect inside the Man of Steel's #1 enemy. While they warned that he would pass away if he was lying, he actually manages to survive the bonding and becomes the new God of Apokolips, harnessing the power of the Omega Effect. After becoming bored of the planet he just became the ruler of, he used the power to become the new Superman following the original's passing, but then he used it to fight a pre-Flashpoint Superman, as confusing as that sounds. It was also shortly lived, as Darkseid was revived and took back the power, and it was also part of the confusing mess that was the New 52, but for a time, Lex Luthor was essentially the new Darkseid, and incredibly powerful. That is all the time we have for today, all you little nerds.
Be sure to catch us next time on Top 10 Nerd. I am Amanda McKnight.
And I'm Adam Andrews, and we'll catch you on the Flippy Flop.
Stay nerdy, YouTube.
Peace out.